live visuals that are just coming in. We're playing out the live visuals coming in. The entire world's focus is going to be here as Pelosi is all set to fly out of Taipei. We're getting in visuals from Taiwan. This is extremely crucial, very important visit, and now she is making her way out. Mr. Maroof Raza is on the phone line with us. Mr. Maroof, the visit is all but over. It lasted for a few hours, but this is a very, very landmark moment, and the impact of it is going to be much more than a few hours or more than a day. It's going to continue for a while now.
Yeah, it's very important that it's involved in a kind of watershed moment in geopolitics in East Asia, because Ms. Pelosi has made it known that she will be pushing hard for American values of democracy and freedom. She has been a big critic of China historically. She has been a big supporter of the Tibetan cause, and therefore it fits with her belief system. But where we need to revisit the historical benchmark which has led to the situation where it is now, that historically American government has been wary of upsetting the Chinese. So they have gone along with the One China policy. They try to accommodate China's business and economic interests in the hope that when China becomes Western afterwards, it will become like a Western democracy. Clearly, successive U.S. governments have read the thing wrong. And as I always say, that America has no shortage of think tanks, but they don't seem to think correctly. They always come up with wrong assessments of their adversaries, whether it is China today or it is the jihadi groups that operate right across West Asia. What we need to now watch is how China would respond. China is obviously going to try and come out of it looking good, because right now China is not looking too good to its admirers and its people. And the Chinese president is itching for a third term, which will be unprecedented, which is due later this year. And if this entire U.S. initiative goes in the advantage of the Americans, he will obviously stand to lose a lot of face. Whether he is going to exercise more military punch towards Taiwan or use the opportunity to make some gains on India's borders is a question that we need to remain alert to. And also, China may be doing live fire exercises around Taiwan, but the U.S. naval armada, which is around Taiwan also right now, there's an aircraft carrier group with at least 4 or 5 major destroyers. They are not a pushover naval fleet. They can bring in to bear much more punch than the Chinese can, despite the numbers of ships that China might put into the waters. So China is aware of that. Any escalation beyond a red line might lead to a confrontation which will make China look bad. So therefore, China wants to win the entire diplomatic argument without having to fight. That is the very basis of Chinese philosophy, that scare your adversary into submission, but don't engage with them, because it might show the shortcomings of the Chinese military systems, like it did in the Galwan standoff with India. So there are a lot of issues that are there right now, but clearly this is a watershed moment. Ms. Pelosi has stood by her beliefs, and she is not exactly an independent operator, because she is the head of the U.S. House of Representatives. That means she represents a large number of the voting constituency in the U.S. She has also come to Taiwan through a very circuitous route through a U.S. Air Force transport plane, but it's a U.S. Air Force plane. So that means it has the consent and support of the U.S. government. And Taiwan is already witnessing major cyber attacks. Apparently, yesterday, the presidential server of Taiwan had crashed because of cyber attacks on Taiwan. But China will do all that it has been doing and perhaps more. But I don't see this situation leading to a full-fledged military conflict. It is just going to worsen relations between China and the U.S. And I see the fallout on the U.S. economy with China wanting to pull out its investments. Whether the U.S. will allow the Chinese to pull its investment out or not will again be a big question about the U.S. commitment to financial engagement. When you invest, you also have the right to pull out. But if they pull out, the U.S. economy will crash. And that's going to have a huge effect on the rest of the world.
Right. It impacted the rest of the world, and that's why the entire world has been watching. I just want to read out the tweet that Nancy Pelosi had also just put out. Our delegation had the distinct privilege of meeting with the president of Taiwan today. We discussed how America and Taiwan can deepen our economic ties, further strengthen our security partnership, and defend our shared democratic values. Srinjoy Chaudhary also joining us on the broadcast. Srinjoy, this is a message coming in from Nancy Pelosi as she is just leaving there. Maroof Raza also saying that the impact of it would mostly be felt in the U.S. economy. But the question also being now, since there's been no response from China, is it safe to say that U.S. has called out China's bluff, or we need to wait and watch and see what happens next?
We may need to wait and watch and see what the Chinese actually do over the next few days. Because if the Chinese hit back, and it is likely that they will, it will be on the diplomatic front. It would be like sending back Ambassador Burns from Beijing back to Washington, D.C. and calling back the Chinese ambassador. That is possible, or something to that tune. The other thing, of course, is economic warfare. China might do a few things that would hurt the American economy. For instance, because there is a trade imbalance between China and America, and positively towards China. China has bought billions of American dollars. Now, if the Americans suddenly find that the Chinese are selling those dollars in the open market, then the one thing that will happen is that the dollar value will crash. It will hurt the U.S. economy most certainly.
Okay, all right.
Now, the things that the Americans are also wary of.
Yes, but will also Taiwan be paying the price for it, Srinjoy? Because now China has begun taking action against Taiwan. In the longer run, would it be tougher for Taiwan now?
See, as far as Taiwan is concerned, Taiwan has made it very, very clear that it wants to be the way it is. And the Chinese have spoken about one China policy. The Americans agree with it. So does India at this point. Though India has strong relations with Taiwan at a different level, economic, social. A lot of people in India learn Mandarin in Taipei. That's a different matter. But we will have to see how India deals with this whole process. And more importantly, what America does and what China does.
Okay, all right. So we continue to be live on these visuals that are coming in. Nancy Pelosi just all set to fly out of Taiwan. Mr. Maroof Raza, on the impact that it's going to have globally, you said it's going to have a very adverse effect. Would you say this was a provocation, or would you say that this was all set to happen? Because as far as the White House statement is concerned as well, it has remained ambiguous.
Well, President Biden and Xi Jinping have had recently virtual engagement through calls through the internet. And in that, the Chinese came across quite strongly about their assertions over Taiwan. The Americans are already aware of that, but Mr. Biden also some months ago had made it known. And that is a very rare statement by a U.S. president, that the United States would intervene if Taiwan is subjected to a military intervention by China. This was not a U.S. stated policy for at least the last few decades. So clearly tensions are high. Ms. Nancy Pelosi would have probably gone ahead with a plan she may have had in mind. Whether she has been egged on by many other political representatives from the House of Congress and the House of Representatives, that this is the time now to step in and make her point more firmly. Whether she has followed that advice, whether she's done it on her own calling, or whether she's been used as a front by the U.S. administration of Joe Biden, I'm not aware. We'll get to know in a few days' time. But essentially, this is clearly a ratcheting up of tensions, and it's not going to calm down easily. It's going to have many spillover effects diplomatically and economically, but I don't see the Chinese resorting to military measures, although the media at some stages has quoted that China has been threatening with military responses. Military responses are clearly, for me at this point of time, I don't see how they can do it and keep the world still out of a conflict scenario. Because when you resort to military responses, they tend to have response and counter-response and counter-response. It goes up very quickly up the ladder, and the world could be staring at a huge confrontation, something like the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Is the world prepared for it? Just when they seem to be coming to terms with Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Or are we now going to enter an era of new conflicts and new confrontations, which is going to define geopolitics for the next few decades? That's a question, I believe, that needs some more clarity and answers, and that is something which is going to keep us busy for the next few months, if not years.
Okay, Mr. Raza, if I could ask you, you spoke of new confrontations. Do you see that happening? It's being called a landmark event, Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. But do you see any change in the U.S. policy towards Taiwan, or do you think this was just a political messaging that will go on, but there's not going to be a big change in terms of policy?
U.S. policy towards Taiwan has already begun to change over the last several months when Mr. Biden made it clear that the U.S. would intervene if China resorts to military measures. Now, the U.S. may take the next step if China doesn't calm down and allow the event to pass off and accept the fact that their bluff has been called off. Then the U.S. may then come out with a more assertive policy and even recognize China. Please understand, even the U.S. doesn't recognize China as far as I know, recognize what is called the Republic of China, which is Taiwan. And if the U.S. does recognize Taiwan, which is a strong economy, which is a reasonably large-sized country in terms of population and size of economy, then, this shadow boxing will continue. But if the U.S. is willing to respond in kind to any measures that China might take, and I think that would lead to recognizing Taiwan as an independent country, then matters could escalate rapidly out of hand. But that's a choice Washington has to make. We'll just have to wait and watch.
Right, Maroof, it's going to be a wait-and-watch game for the moment as far as how the U.S. actually takes this forward. But the last less than 24 hours, in fact, ever since Nancy Pelosi landed in Taipei at about 8 p.m., she's had the world watching her. And it has been enough in terms of the optics of it to really send Beijing huffing and puffing. We've seen the kind of reactions that have come to the fore, first from their mouthpieces and then from the government of China as well.
It's good it's happened. And I'm glad that somebody could look Beijing in the eye. More of us should do the same. Because, you see, China is the elephant in the room in all parts of the world, whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's our subcontinent, it's all over. And for long, even the Indian government had been reluctant to name China as the trouble creator in our region, disrupting our economic plans, as well as encircling India with bases all around. Why not look them straight in the eye and talk the language they talk to the rest of the world? Why are we? And we can't get away by shielding our weaknesses by calling it diplomatic decency. I'm sorry. I mean, diplomatic decency can apply when the other country is willing to also follow norms. China doesn't. It's sitting on Indian territory, which we claim, at least on the basis of maps that were published in 2020 and in 1954. And if they are sitting as occupants on your territory, then why don't we talk straight to them? Just look at the number of dialogues we've had with China about their interventions after Galwan. We've had more than 14 dialogues, and nothing is coming out of it. And every time we have the Foreign Ministry of India giving all sorts of self-congratulatory statements to say, we're looking forward to a resolution of the whole issue. And the same applied to our special representative level talks with China, 24 of them leading to nothing. So, we've got to decide that we can't be tiptoeing around issues which are important. The same would apply to America. America has been very, very cautious about not offending China. China was responsible for the spread of the virus, and millions of people died. For a much lesser percentage of people that would have died, the world could have gone to war. And here, it came out of labs in Wuhan, but you never laid the blame on the table. And the Chinese are not getting to investigate there, where every other assessment says it came from the Chinese labs. China has been threatening a lot of countries and buying them out and making their economies collapse. Sri Lanka is the latest case in point. Again, nobody wants to name China. So if you want to take that approach, then be prepared for China walking all over you. And if you want to take a more aggressive approach, then China will think twice before messing around with you.
Right, and China has already done that even with Taiwan. Not only, like I said earlier, it's not just comments that have come to the fore, but China has also gone on to, in a way, punish Taiwan, so to say. They rolled out curbs yesterday on the import of fruit and fish. From there, they halted shipments in the wake of the visit as well. So they are trying every trick in the book that they can to try and put pressure on those that they can do so with.
That is what China always does. But I'm sure there are countermeasures and there are emergency response mechanisms put in place. One classic example is every time China does their activity around the Taiwan Strait, Taiwanese people go into underground tube shelters to protect themselves as a rehearsal against a possible Chinese attack. Taiwan is always prepared, either economically or militarily. The question is, how much is America willing to push its guard?